Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Let's launch into a new episode of Rock and Read. Today we'll be reading part 2 of chapter 16 of the groovy book Janis, Her Life in Music. When we left off, Janis just split from Big Brother, heading into 1969 with a new band. So let's continue. Janis had no downtime. She immediately had to transition from playing Big Brother concerts to rehearsing with the new group, and the band was not gelling. Skip Prokop had withdrawn from the project after Janis insisted on including Sam Andrew in the new band. I said to her, "I don't think Sammy's good enough to play in this kind of band," Prokop explained, when she told him Sammy is non-negotiable. Prokop quit, returning to Canada and starting the band Lighthouse. On keyboards, Grossman had enlisted Indiana native Bill King, who played the Hammond B3 organ in village clubs with drummer Roy Markowitz, who replaced Prokop. The two flew to San Francisco to meet bassist Brad Campbell, staying at Mark Bronstein's mother's apartment. "The three of us were on the same wavelength and totally into it," King recalled. Roy and Brad were really straight and not screwed up on drugs. When Janis invited them to her apartment for dinner, the first thing they noticed was a sculpture of a large phallus in the living room. Then several rowdy Hells Angels arrived, the drugs and booze consumption increased, and things started to get really out there, King said. So we left. For Janis's horn section, Grossman hired the Erst, while Electric Flag's tenure saxophonist Terry Clements and trumpeter Marcus Doubleday, the latter of whom was addicted to heroin. On the first day of rehearsal, Doubleday arrived late with a syringe jammed into his horn. Adding to the pressure, Grossman had already booked a gig for the band. They were to play in the soul capital of Memphis at a Yuletide Thing concert organized by Stax Records, Otis Redding's label. Grossman enlisted Mike Bloomfield to oversee a mere 3 days of rehearsals before they flew to Memphis. Although Bloomfield and the band's drummer, Levon Helm, who checked out a rehearsal, reported to Grossman that the group was coming together, Terry Clements recalled otherwise. The 29-year-old Englishman found the rehearsals chaotic and unproductive, with no one taking a strong leadership role. Sam Andrew's strongest memory was of buying balloons of heroin prior to each rehearsal. Janis continued to slide toward addiction alongside Andrew and her paramour Peggy Caserta. On December 20th, 1968, Janis and her new band arrived in Memphis to rehearse at Stax. Being in the studio where Otis Redding recorded was thrilling, but unnerving for Janis, who tried to take charge of rehearsal. There she was, hair flying, jumping around, yelling and screaming, "Too slow! Still too slow! No, too fast!" reported Ralph Garcia, a fledgling writer and photographer covering the band's debut for Circus magazine. They rehearsed for almost 4 hours, with Bloomfield riding herd, jumping, shouting, and slowly bringing them together. It had only been 8 months since Martin Luther King's assassination at the Lorraine Motel, a gathering place for Stax artists. The concert poster listed Janis as the headliner above all these great Stax artists underneath, said Bill King. And that put a bad feeling in the air. I think some people thought, here's this Janis Joplin coming to town and demanding top billing. She just felt horrible and wanted to apologize to everybody. Janis and her band joined Stax artists at a party at the home of label president Jim Stewart. There, she sipped cocktails and posed for pictures with stars Rufus Thomas and daughter Carla, Judy Clay, William Bell, and members of the MGs and the reconstituted Bar Keys, Redding's surviving band members. She also met journalist Stanley Booth, who was covering the concert for what she called those at Rolling Stone. Things did not go well on Saturday night. During soundcheck, Janis and the band were thrown off by the Mid-South Coliseum's sonorous acoustics, and they encountered persistent technical difficulties with their amps and the PA. Clad in a feather-trimmed cerise jumpsuit, Janis looked sort of like a big, sexy bird, according to Garcia. After a high-energy opening slot by the Bar Keys in matching zebra-striped outfits and doing a dance called the Sideways Pony, their Stax label mates followed in rapid succession, each polishing off highly entertaining sets, appreciated loudly by the crowd. Following Eddie Floyd, Janis's band took its time, fumbling with equipment while the restless audience waited impatiently. Janis finally opened with new covers they had worked up, Floyd's Raise Your Hand and the Bee Gees' To Love Somebody, which Janis delivered Otis style. Applause was tepid. The primarily black audience wasn't familiar with Janis's sound, and the small number of teenage rock fans knew only Big Brother's Piece of My Heart and Ball and Chain, the songs Janis planned to sing as an encore. After a sluggish summertime, Janis and the company shuffled off stage, with no calls for their return. Instead, Stax's Johnny Taylor rushed out to close the show with a dynamic version of his current smash, Who's Making Love. Though well-wishers offered reassurance backstage, Janis was devastated. At least they didn't throw things, she muttered to Stanley Booth. Afterward, Janis, Doubleday, and Andrew all shot heroin and nodded out. It was insanity for us to play at the Temple of Soul, Andrew reflected later. We had just started this band, and we played very badly. Though Garcia's circus feature raved that Janis's performance was fantastic, Booth chided her in Rolling Stone, recommending she might start over with some musicians who know already how to do the sideways pony. The Memphis Fiasco was an omen of the year to come, a band with a revolving door membership and no real leadership. Between her drug and alcohol consumption and her inexperience directing a band, Janis found herself the captain of a rudderless ship. She wanted the camaraderie of early Big Brother, but with her, the star calling the shots, it turned out she couldn't have it both ways, at least not for now. A week later, Bill King vanished. Unbeknownst to the band, the FBI had detained him for draft evasion, and to avoid jail, he enlisted in the Army, then went AWOL to Canada, where he remained. The drug-addicted Doubleday also left the band. In San Francisco, Janis discovered keyboardist Robbie Kermode, 22, playing in a North Beach topless joint, and someone recommended trumpeter Terry Hensley, a part-time cab driver. The new band spent the next month rehearsing Big Brother songs and new material. In addition to the Memphis numbers, they added a song by Piece of My Heart, co-author Jerry Ragaboy. Try just a little bit harder. Nick Gravenites, another band advisor, taught them his bluesy scorcher, Work Me Lord. Despite the worthy material, Janis was not yet able to articulate to her band the music she heard in her head, the swamp of Jerry LaCroix's Roadhouse R&B, mixed with her interpretation of the Stax sound. Vocally, she inspired to be Etta James, Aretha Franklin, and Tina Turner, women whose music she now name-checked as inspirations, just as she had Bessie Smith and Big Mama Thornton. She gave me respect, James later said about Janis. When I heard her sing, I recognized my influence, but I also heard the electricity and rage in her own voice. Janis was beginning to acknowledge being in striking distance of her role model's artistry, but this prospect also intimidated her. Janis's drinking and drugging didn't help matters. While alcohol and dope offered relief from anxiety, guilt, and insecurity, they blunted her ability to communicate and deeply connect with her musicians, sapping her of her strength needed to commandeer a band. She also now had the means to indulge in expensive intoxicants as much as she wanted. In the contest between her ambition and self-destruction was winning. When writer Michael Wyden interviewed her for a New York Times Magazine feature, she told him, "I'm scared about her new musical direction, but I never hold back. I'm always on the outer limits of probability." During the lengthy chat, which started at a boozy rehearsal and then continued at a pool hall in her apartment, she acknowledged her drinking was a crutch. "When I get scared and worried, I tell myself, Janis, have a good time. So I juice up real good." She added a prophetic statement. "Man, I'd rather have 10 years of super hyping most living than live to be 70 by sitting in some god chair watching TV." She pointed to her new lynx coat. "That fur coat, too. Know how I got that? Southern Comfort. Far out. I had the chick in my manager's office photostat every god clipping that ever had me mentioning Southern Comfort, and I sent them to the company, and they sent me a whole lot of money. How could anybody in their right mind want me for their image? Oh man, that was the best hustle I ever pulled. Can you imagine getting paid for passing out for 2 years?" Wyndon's article asked, "Will she make it?" Janis Joplin had changed signals. Instead of rock, it's rhythm and blues. In February 1969, 2 weeks after Janis's 26th birthday, she and her new six-piece band flew to the East Coast to try again. John Cook continued as road manager, and Bobby Newhart signed on informally as Janis's aide-de-camp, the role he'd held with Dylan. Joining Bronstein were roadies George Ostro and Vince Mitchell, the latter of whom would be Janis's occasional lover. With a blizzard raging, they returned to the Fillmore East midweek for 4 sold-out shows beginning February 11th. Backstage, Janis gave an interview to Mike Wallace of the CBS TV news magazine program 60 Minutes, then in its first season, for a segment on the Fillmore called Carnegie Hall for Kids. Like a student trying to convince an elder, she earnestly touted the honesty of the blues, explaining to Wallace why young people were getting into black music, any kind of music that tells the truth. Adding to the stress of opening night in New York, bassist Brad Campbell's visa had expired, and they worried he'd be recognized on stage and deported back to Canada. To hide him in plain sight, Friedman told the press that Keith Cherry had replaced Campbell. Newhart used an eyebrow pencil to darken Campbell/Cherry's blonde mustache and sideburns, with sunglasses and Janis's fur hat completing the ridiculous disguise. On stage, the loud horn section sometimes drowned out or competed with Janis's vocals. Extremely nervous, she overcompensated, straining her voice, and strangled the songs to death, according to Rolling Stone critic Paula Nelson. He compared her to both actor Richard Burton and a Radio City Music Hall rocket, and complained that Janis and band failed to mesh. Andrew's guitar did not always work with the horns, and some of the new arrangements of Big Brother's songs were awkward. Emulating the performance style of Stax Artist and the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, Janis, tambourine in hand, boogalooed while the instrumentalist soloed. Afterward, against Myra Friedman's wishes, she gave Nelson an interview. In his cover story, Janis, the Judy Garland of rock, Garland would die of a drug overdose in June. Nelson painted the picture of a neurotic mess, painfully defensive about her new approach, which he said resembled a brass burlesque show. 6 weeks later, when they performed back in San Francisco at Bill Graham's Winterland, the subdued audience did not call for an encore, a first on her home turf. Joining her afterward in the dressing room, journalist John Bowers noted, "She is pale, as if in shock, saying, 'San Francisco's changed, man. Where are my people? They used to be so wild. I know I sang well. I know I did.' She should scrap this band and go right back to being a member of Big Brother," hissed Ralph Gleason at the end of his spiteful Chronicle review, "if they'll have her." The next night she added a couple of Big Brother songs to the set list, and the response improved. But Janis took such sights hard, escaping into a heroin haze with Caserta and her old friend Sunshine, now a junkie and living with Janis and Gravenites. Shortly after the Winterland shows, Janis's roommates found her unconscious with blue-tinged skin. They managed to resuscitate her from an overdose of heroin, her first. In December, Janis would tell a doctor that she had OD'd several times that year, revived by Gravenites and others, but the grip of heroin was such that even those near-death experiences didn't deter her from using. Janis's band still had no permanent name. She'd use Main Squeeze for it in her next band on occasion, perhaps because it didn't really have a group vibe, but was rather an aggregation of players chosen to back her. A notable new addition was alto sax player Cornelius Snooki Flowers, a former member of Oakland soul group Johnny Tolbert and The Things, and who had worked with Mike Bloomfield. An African-American Navy veteran, Flowers grew up in Leesville, Louisiana, near Port Arthur. In September, Janis would invite him to stay with her family, the first time a black man slept in the Joplin home, and he squired Janis to R&B clubs in Port Arthur's segregated black district. "I had never heard a white girl sing that good," Flowers recalled about first seeing Janis in '67 with Big Brother. "But that band was the sorriest I ever heard. I said, man, she's singing funk, and that band is playing some other kind of." Janis and Flowers became close soon after he joined the tour in New York in mid-February. She opened her hotel room door wearing nothing but her bra and panties and said, "Hey, baby," he recounted. One night they went to the Village to see jazz multi-instrumentalist Roland Kirk, who announced from the stage, "We got a star among us tonight." It freaked her out, Flowers related, but he said, "Come on up here and play with us." She was scared to death, but they played Piece of My Heart better than we played it. Flowers' take-charge personality made him a natural leader, and his contributions to the group increased until he was singing a couple of songs during each set. On the Ed Sullivan Show on March 16th, Janis and the band played live, and Flowers was featured prominently in an era where there were few biracial bands on TV. They had performed in Ann Arbor, Michigan the day before, and afterward Janis stayed up all night partying at a blues club. I wanted to look as funky as I could for Ed Sullivan tonight, she told John Bowers. I don't think I may be too funky now. Yet on the Sullivan Show, she appeared energized, though raspy-voiced, on the two songs the group performed. Maybe, the 1958 Chantel's ballad she'd loved as a teen, and Raise Your Hand, during which she shimmied while the horn section vamped. When Sullivan, whom she had watched so often with her family, grabbed her hand afterward, she was elated. His handshake a sure sign of approval, she told the band. John Bowers, who had been traveling with the group, noted that Janis had only slept 1.5 hours over the past 48. Soon after, days before the band departed for a European tour, veteran trumpeter Louis Gasca, who had worked for Count Basie, Mongo, Santa Maria, and others, replaced Hensley. During the first 3 weeks in April, the band gelled in Europe, performing in Stockholm, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Copenhagen, Paris, and London. The latter city, where the band spent its first 8 days rehearsing, greeted Janis as if she were visiting royalty from a different planet. Accompanied by Ian Kimmett, a Grossman protege who worked for his UK publishing company, she tantalized tabloid journalists and broadcasters with her heavy drinking and flirtatious bravado, while perfecting her bawdy blues mama persona. She boasts a facade of utter shock, sniffed one scribe, a constant barrage of four-letter nondescriptive adjectives. This week she was to have been the cover story on Newsweek, but former President Dwight Eisenhower's death meant that the feature on her had to be postponed. She had some very un-American things to say about Eisenhower. God, it 14 heart attacks and he had to die in my week. Janis would appear on a May issue of Newsweek with the cover line, Rebirth of the Blues. Linda Gravenites was on hand to take care of her wardrobe, and the two were invited to join George and Patty Harrison for dinner. Janis finally got to meet her favorite Beatle. During rehearsals, Janis took on the demeanor of drill sergeant, Kimmett recalled, screaming orders and whipping the band into shape. With the group's newfound tightness, European audiences did not look back and yell for Big Brother, and the positive feedback contributed to the growing cohesion of the ensemble. The horns joined Sam Andrews' guitar on the intro to Summertime in combination of the two, where they added punch even if Janis occasionally could not hit the high whoa-whoas. While she gave her voice a rest, Flowers sang two numbers, a song he had wrote called Me, on which Janis thwacked on a cowbell, and a cover of Otis Redding's I Can't Turn You Loose, with Janis doing the Louisiana Dirty Bop. In Copenhagen, she joined the opening act, Fleetwood Mac. Several of the European concerts were recorded. In Frankfurt, the band played a second show for television broadcast. I make it a policy not to tell anyone to sit down, so they'll all stand up, she told the audience, composed of U.S. enlisted men, their wives, and a few long-haired Germans. I want to see you people move, she demanded. By show's end, during Piece of My Heart, Janis was surrounded on stage by deliriously dancing GIs and mini-skirted women. At the sold-out finale at Royal Albert Hall, Janis successfully drove the usually staid British audience to get out of its seats and dance. Eric Clapton and Fleetwood Mac were among the musicians in attendance, though Mick Jagger reportedly sniped he wouldn't be going because, if I wanted to hear black singing, then I'll listen to black singers. The high-energy performance was an unmitigated triumph, and afterward, Newirth and Cook recorded Janis's happy chatter. God, I'm so happy! I got 'em all off their butts! I think I'll call my mother. Instead, she excused herself in her suite to join Sam Andrew in the bathroom to shoot up. She had been covertly doing heroin on the tour, taking the risk of sneaking it across borders. San Franciscans Bob Seidman and Stanley Mouse in London, and attending the packed party, realized something was amiss. They discovered Andrew had overdosed, while Janis and Gravenites plunged him naked in a bath of ice-cold water, where a groupie named Susie Cream Cheese straddled him. He revived, Seidman warned Eric Clapton, who had started using heroin, to leave the party in case the police arrived. For Linda Gravenites, always opposed to Janis's heroin use, the harrowing scene was the last straw. She decided to stay on in London rather than return with Janis. Patty and George Harrison had hired her to make a beaded purse and jacket, and she moved into the Harrison manor. "I'll come home when you stop doing smack," she told Janis. Back in the States, touring continued, but Janis, angry over Gravenite's defection, took it out on the band members, haranguing them about their playing, while the demoralized musicians criticized her performances. Markowitz quit, replaced by L.A. rock drummer Maury Baker. Janis's longtime pal Mark Bronstein, disturbed by the dissension, also resigned. Janis had taken up with keyboardist Richard Kermode, but that relationship soon fizzled. Throughout, she remained closest with Sam Andrew, whose musical contributions suffered from his own heroin use. In June, Janis, now on a salary of $300 a week, with much of her earnings invested, returned to Columbia's LA studio to record a new album. This time, Grossman selected Gabriel Meckler, who had produced the Paupers' second album, as well as hits by Three Dog Night and Steppenwolf. In an attempt to clean up and prepare, Janis moved in with Meckler and his family. Her voice was shot from touring, screaming on stage, smoking, and drinking. A classically trained pianist and a likable guy, according to Three Dog Night's Chuck Negron, Meckler wanted to collaborate with her on the pre-production and recording process. Negron, whose first meeting with Janis at the Whiskey had ended in a drunken argument, stopped by Meckler's Hollywood home while she was in residence. "She was standing in the kitchen helping his wife with the cooking," he recounted in his memoir, Three Dog Nightmare. Wearing an apron and with her hair up, Janis seemed this whole other person without the drugs and booze, with a certain awkwardness, shyness, and vulnerability. She was actually very nice, very sweet. Recording sessions took place over 10 days in mid-June. Meckler saw the album as Janis's debut solo effort, and her musicians as mediocre sidemen, nothing more. They clashed in the studio when he tried to direct them. Meckler had never worked in Columbia Studio D, where only union engineers were allowed to touch the equipment. At one point, an engineer accidentally erased an entire take, angering the band, and the group's unheeded request for a raise from Grossman stirred more resentment. "Everybody was putting down everybody else," said bassist Brad Campbell. "It was a total mess." Still, they managed to cut fine versions of the songs they had been playing live: Try, Maybe, To Love Somebody, and Work Me Lord. While at Meckler's, Janis had been writing new songs, including One Good Man, her update of a Bessie Smith blues. It came to life in the studio with magnificent guitar work, bottleneck slide, and a blistering solo by Mike Bloomfield, uncredited on the LP. Nick Gravenite's As Good As You've Been to This World began with a long opening vamp by the horn section featuring Gaska's trumpet and the saxophones of Clements and Flowers. Janis's raspy, testifying vocals came in halfway through, with lyrics voicing her philosophy: live your loving life, live it all the best you can. During the final sessions, they perfected the album's standouts. The Richards Rodgers - Lorenz heart song Little Girl Blue, which Janis named as a favorite among her repertoire, was a challenge for all. Bloomfield and Meckler arranged parts for a string section, and Janis's voice never sounded more vulnerable. Inspired by the 1959 Nina Simone recording, she truly made it her own. Simone, notoriously critical, praised Janis's version while playing the song at the 1974 Montreux Jazz Festival, and name-checked her again at the same fest in '76. Andrew's guitar licks, similar to his Summertime intro, were kept spare. The strings flow in while the drums remain soft. Janis gives one of her strongest vocal performances on record, with just the right amount of melisma near the song's end. She almost used the pretty voice her mother loves so much. God, did she ever just want to sing rather than just scream it out? Meckler recalled. She wanted to develop her voice and go to a high level of art. For a while, Janis had been talking about the cosmic blues, the existential darkness spun from the Saturday Night Swindle letdowns that tormented her. She finally put those Black Dog thoughts into the lyrics of a devastating song that would inspire the name of her new album, I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama. Time keeps moving on. Friends, they turn away. Well, I keep moving on, but I never found out why. I keep pushing so hard a dream. I keep trying to make it right. Well, I'm 25 years older now, so I know it can't be right. And I'm no better, baby, and I can't help you no more than I did when I was just a girl. I'm gonna hold it, yeah. I'm gonna use it till the day I die. Meckler co-wrote the music for Cosmic Blues and brought in two members of Steppenwolf, drummer Jerry Edmonton, and keyboardist Goldie McJohn to play on it. Following Meckler's gorgeous piano melody, Janis's vocals came in with restrained emotion. I keep pushing too hard. She stretches out and finds that her initial restraint adds to the building emotion of the song. The horns join piano and guitar for the poignant chorus. Janis's distraught vocals end the ballad with a wrenching pathos. Janis would dedicate the album to Nancy G. On July 4th, 1969, Nancy Gurley died of a heroin overdose after James had injected himself and his wife during a wilderness camping trip. When he was arrested for second-degree murder, Janis contributed $20,000 for his legal defense. He was later acquitted. When Janis and Sam Andrew learned of Nancy's death, they immediately shot up, an addict's typical response to such trauma. Soon after, perhaps heeding Grossman's advice, Janis fired Sam. After doing dope together again, she told him bluntly, "Your services are no longer required." The guitarist did not react. When she asked him, "Don't you want to know why?" Andrew said, "What difference does it make?" As part of the farewell, they made love for the first and only time. Andrew agreed to teach his parts to her new guitarist, Canadian John Till, poached by Grossman from Ronnie Hawkins' backing group, the Hawks, whose alumni included all 5 members of the band. John Till, 23, joined in time for the Atlanta Pop Festival, which included Led Zeppelin at one of its first U.S. festivals. Janis and the newly named Cosmic Blues Band then played the Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, where Dylan had been booed while backed by the band in 1965. It would be Andrew's last gig, and John Till's second. Janis came on to thunderous ovation, reported journalist Ellen Sander. She performed all blues and doos and spitfire, crooned and wailed and gave herself inside out. She danced into every number. The band cooked hard behind her. Nationally, security had been cracking down on concert-goers, trying to prevent fans from storming the stage. Janis couldn't abide by such rules. At Forest Hills, when the audience demanded more after her last song, the rent-a-cops marched out in dignified single file from both sides of the stage and stood in front of it in a solid line, according to Sander. Janis's eyes popped at the sight of them. She held the microphone away from her face and let out a stream of curses that stopped them dead. "Go!" she demanded. "Get the out of here!" she screamed, this time right in the microphone. Her command echoed around the stadium, and the audience cheered. The cops went back the way they came, and a great cheer went up. Janis said, "They gotta understand, these pigs, that what's going on here is for us. It's not for them." Such proclamations would not turn out so well at Tampa 4 months later on November 16th, my birthday. When a cop stepped on stage with a bullhorn during summertime to demand the concert end before the curfew, Janis went ballistic. "Get off my stage, mother! How dare you stop me in the middle of a song!" she blared into her mic. Afterwards, she was arrested and booked on obscenity and other charges. Her mugshot was taken at 1:15, her first since getting busted in Berkeley for shoplifting 6 years earlier. The charges were eventually settled out of court, with the obscenity claim being dropped due to the First Amendment, with Janis paying a $200 fine and hefty legal fees. By then, she was on the FBI surveillance list under suspicion of inciting riots. Throughout the late spring and early summer of 1969, the buzz was that 3 days of peace and music at a bucolic gathering in upstate New York would be monumental. On August 15th, Janis and her band arrived at the Liberty Holiday Inn the day before their appointed slot to play the Woodstock Music and Arts Fair. Janis and pals from the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane hung out in the motel lounge, drinking, playing poker, and repeatedly selecting the Beatles' Hey Jude on the jukebox. Joe McDonald had a brief reunion with Janis in her motel room that ended with a blowjob, he recalled. Then, following Janis's license with her roadie Vince Mitchell, Peggy Caserta arrived and took over as Janis's playmate. At one point, while talking to the press, Janis flirtatiously grabbed Caserta's breast. By some accounts, the lovers shot heroin during the long wait for Janis and the band's performance. Yet in the artist area at the festival site on Saturday, Janis remained vivacious and engaged, continuing the party, flitting around and pouring champagne for all. After late-night sets by the Grateful Dead and Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Cosmic Blues Band finally went on stage in the wee hours of Sunday, August 17th. Peering into the darkness, populated by 500,000 people, tiny lights twinkled as far as the eye could see. Janis reached out to the crowd like an Earth Mother. "Do you have enough water and a place to sleep?" It would be John Tell's first gig as the lone guitarist, and he rose to the occasion, interplaying his leads with the horn section and keyboardists. At 3 in the morning, and after days of little sleep, Janis didn't have her usual high energy when opening with Raise Your Hand, though her shrieks and screams surely awakened those nodding out. She spent much of the instrumental vamp As Good As You've Been to Me dancing barefoot, clad in a Technicolor tie-dye ensemble with a long gold-trimmed vest, soon removed. Janis delivered a soulful to Love Somebody in a sultry summertime. She blasted through, tried just a little bit harder, and then slowed down for Cosmic Blues, which she introduced by warning, talking about the Cosmic Blues. If you don't know what I mean, you will soon enough. On stage for nearly 60 minutes, she was spent by the time she began Ball and Chain. Her voice sounded scorched and then depleted as she drew out the ending, while her bandmates veered into dissonance. Still, she came back for an encore of a sped-up but strong Piece of My Heart. Elliot Sander reported that Janis Joplin danced with the audience as if it were one. They shouted back at her. They wouldn't let her off until she had drained off every drop of her energy. Because Grossman refused to allow Janis's performance to be included in the original Woodstock documentary, released in March 1970, it was rumored that she had bombed. But the recordings and existing footage prove otherwise for much of her hour on stage. Festivals proliferated during the summer of 1969, and Janis and the Cosmic Blues Band played gatherings in Texas, Ohio, and Louisiana. 19-year-old Bruce Springsteen and his band Child opened for Janis at Convention Hall in Ashbury Park, New Jersey. He was just her type, and she made that clear, but Springsteen would have none of it. "Help! She's after me!" he pleaded with his guitarist Little Steven Van Zandt, who recalled with a chuckle how his bandmate hid out to avoid Janis's advances. The constant touring hadn't helped band morale. When saxophonist Terry Clements had a rare moment alone with Janis, he confessed he wanted to quit. Louis Gaskell left, and trumpet player Dave Woodwind replaced him. Then her trusted friend and road manager John Cook tendered his resignation, effective October 5th, following the band's return to Winterland. A young Seattle-based promoter, Joe Crowley, was enlisted to take over for Cook. Fortunately, Janis still had Neuwirth in her camp, and that fall he gave her the most wondrous gift. At Grossman's office one day, Neuwirth had been chatting with Canadian singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot, who turned him on to a fantastic song he had just learned in Nashville. He took out his guitar and played Me and Bobby McGee, Neuwirth recounted. "I said, 'That's a good song. Teach it to me.' So I wrote down the words, and I said, 'Who wrote it?' He said, 'Some guy down in Nashville named Chris Christopherson. He's got a whole bunch of good songs.' This was before Chris was getting cut. Maybe Roger Miller had cut it, but I hadn't heard it. That very night, I was having dinner with Janis. I went down and picked her up, and while she and her girlfriend were getting ready, I played the song on her guitar. She goes, 'What is that song, man? Teach it to me.' So I did." Janis began practicing Bobby McGee on her acoustic guitar, and by the time she and her band played Nashville's Fairgrounds Coliseum on December 16th, she felt the time was right. Without warning, she started strumming the captivating song, and the band fell in behind her. When she told the audience that Me and Bobby McGee was by a Nashville songwriter, the applause was thunderous. Janis had been listening to country rock performed by the Flying Burrito Brothers and others at the Palomino Club in North Hollywood. Like Graham Parsons of the Burritos, she ordered some custom designs from Nudie the Rodeo Taylor, inventor of the Rhinestone Cowboy. "Did you read about him in Rolling Stone?" she wrote Linda Gravenites in London. "He makes the incredible, flashy Western clothes. Real gaudy stuff, just what I wanted. I'm getting a pants and vest outfit, purple with flowers and scroll work, encrusted with all sorts of colored rhinestones. I'm so excited. Real flashy colored rhinestones." Janis had pleaded with Gravenites to return to California. "I'd rather have something by you, but Linda stayed away for the time being. I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama debuted on Billboard on October 11th, remaining there for 28 weeks and gradually moving up to number 5. It produced only one minor hit, the song Cosmic Blues, which stalled just outside the top 40. Reviews were lukewarm, with Janis again being taken to task for her new musical direction. Some male critics accused her of being bent on becoming Aretha Franklin and derided her for dumping Big Brother. Writers her with words as if there weren't any other way to deal with her. Australian critic Lillian Roxon lamented, "An exception was an insightful piece in the Village Voice by Johanna Skier, who wrote that Janis was singing stronger and better. The top of her range is more solid, and her vocal control is maturing. She breaks through into greatness by anyone's standards." Indeed, the album still sounds fresh today and includes some of her best vocal performances, particularly on Little Girl Blue, Maybe, and Cosmic Blues. But the band's relative lack of success confirmed Janis and Grossman's instincts to disband the group. The Cosmic Blues Band had played the most high-profile dates of her career and also appeared on several national television programs, including a jaw-dropping live set on Tom Jones's variety show. Janis did a breathtaking Little Girl Blues, and the chemistry between her and the soulful Welshman on their duet of Raise Your Hand, during which they boogied together during the horn vamp, was unlike any other primetime fare, before or since. The Cosmic Blues Band's final stop would be at Madison Square Garden, where Janis recently danced to the Rolling Stones after singing an impromptu duet with Tina Turner during Ike and Tina's opening slot on the Stones' first U.S. tour in 3 years. During Janis' sold-out concert on December 19th, she was joined by old friends for a freewheeling Bo Diddley. Beaumont's guitar prodigy Johnny Winter, who had just signed with Columbia, and blues harmonica player and singer Paul Butterfield. It was a crazy night, with John Bowers recalling the garden nearly caving in under the weight of all that frenzy and jumping around by the ecstatic audience. Janis dedicated the show to the New York Jets. She had recently had a one-night stand with the team's shaggy-haired quarterback Broadway Joe Namath. There was a fabulous after-party hosted by Clive Davis and his wife at their deluxe Central Park apartment, where Janis, clad in black chiffon and high on heroin, encountered Bob Dylan for the first time since introducing herself to him at Monterey in 1963. "I'm going to be famous one day," she told him then. Whether or not they commiserated at the party on the downside of fame is unknown, but according to Davis, Dylan never removed his gloves or coat. Well, that's the end of chapter 16. Next time we'll read the final chapter. We're almost done. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.